Southern, we're going to be talking about a very true story. And this story did not just change the small rural community around me, not even the state of Georgia, but it changed the lives of many people and even the American justice system. The story begins and ironically ends right here. This property was once owned by the Strickland family, a very large family and a very powerful family. And they ruled it as though it was a kingdom. In fact, they very arrogantly called it the kingdom. And the Strickland patriarch, it was always run by a Strickland patriarch, and it was passed down from one to the other. In 1932, the patriarch was John Strickland, a very colorful individual who, everybody said, walked around in balloon-sleeved white shirts and a black vest, always wearing 2 pearl-handled pistols. He was something. It is said that he was not somebody you wanted to mess with, and those who crossed him didn't live to tell it. John Strickland's reign over the kingdom came to an abrupt end on the night of October 19th, 1932, when Revenuer Elsie Hancock, who was actually very infamous from here south all through mid and southern Georgia, both revered for how good he was at tracking and very hated for how many stills he broke up. Well, see, the Strickland clan, they were big into moonshining. And on the night of October the 19th, 1932, Elsie Hancock and some other agents were laying in some bushes waiting on old man Strickland to come and check the mash. When he did, Elsie Hancock stood up and said, "Halt, we're federal agents." And John Strickland's answer was just a hail of bullets. He pulled those 2 pistols and started shooting. And Elsie Hancock returned fire, and John Strickland fell dead in his own steel yard. And he had several brothers, but one brother had murdered his other brother over a woman, and the last brother remaining was Mozart Strickland, and he wasn't the leadership type. That left one person, John Strickland's nephew, John Wallace, who was very glad and very happy to take on the leadership role as being king of the kingdom, and he took it seriously. He did end up with those pearl-handled pistols, and one he gave to someone for protection, a woman, and the other one he carried on him at all times. He brought back the moonshining. He also started a dairy farm, and wasn't all that successful of a dairy farm, but they also had tenant farmers. And so everything was running really good for John Wallace. He was loved by everybody in the town of Chipley, that today would be known as Pine Mountain, Georgia. But everybody loved him. He was charming, he was kind, and always there to help people out, and always given to the local church. He was part of the Methodist church, and he bought pews and all sorts of stuff. But once again, everybody knew not to cross him. They said, one person was quoted, one of his friends was quoted as saying he was good as gold unless you crossed him. And there's a number of people who crossed him and ended up dead and buried in his fields. But one of those people who crossed him became a victim and is the center of our story. And his name is William Herndon Turner, also known as Wilson Turner. To Wallace, he was Wilson Turner, because he was using his brother's name, because he had gone AWOL from after World War II. I guess he came home from leave and neglected to go back. Before World War II, William Turner had first come to this property to deliver something for his dad's farm. His dad was actually a pretty successful farmer in Crawford County, Musella, Georgia. They had driven here to deliver some things, and he saw the nice dairy, he saw the nice house. It wasn't, John Wallace's house was nice, but pretty normal it was not a mansion by any means, because John Wallace didn't care about things, he cared about power. And but William Turner saw everything here, and he liked what he saw. And so once he was out of the Army and using his brother's name, Wilson, he came and asked for a job. And he got one. He moved into one of the nicer tenant houses. It was actually John Wallace's first house before he built his new one. And so he worked a couple of years, did really good, and Wallace rented him a tractor for his, he had some good crops that came in, and he was married to a woman named Julia Leith. And they had a baby named Johnny. Things were going along pretty good for Wilson. From here on out, we will refer to him as William because that's what his name was, even though at this point, John Wallace did not know. Actually, even Julia did not know his name was William. Not sure how that happened, but okay. Everything was rolling along good, and Wallace began to trust Turner enough to bring him in on his moonshining operation. And Turner would run moonshine for him. And he was doing good. He was making money. The problem is he was spending that money, and not always in the wisest of ways. He went down to LaGrange and put a down payment on a new Ford truck. And his wife wore store-bought clothes. And at that point in time, tenant farmers were not making a lot of money. Not enough to buy a new truck, and not enough for store-bought clothes. So this drew attention to him, and consequently to John Wallace as well. So Wallace didn't like that. And it all came to a head one night when Turner ran an extra load of shine after Wallace told him not to, because revenuers had been hanging around and he didn't want them finding his still. So Turner was fired and made to leave. And he did. But he was angry because he still had crops in the field, and those crops equaled money. And so, and he needed money. He had another baby on the way. Julia was pregnant. So they left and they went to Carrollton because Julia had family in Carrollton. But that William was not okay with that. He was angry. He felt cheated by Wallace. And he was just thoroughly put out with this powerful man who just took him for everything he was worth, basically. And so he snuck out and he stole 2 of Wallace's prize Guernsey cows. He had paid a lot of money. These were registered cows. And when you think that, around 1900, horse thievery and cattle thievery were hangable offenses, So it was a pretty big crime, but at the same time, in William Turner's mind, he was just getting what he was owed. It was a bad choice on his part. As mentioned earlier, Police Chief Threadgill of Carrollton caught William, aka Wilson Turner, as he was trying to move the cow from the pasture. They had just kind of found somebody else's pasture and just sort of hid the Guernsey cows in with theirs. And when he found a buyer, he went back to get them, to take them out. And so Collier had put out the word throughout all the surrounding counties for all the law enforcement to be on the lookout for this darn Guernsey cow that seemed to be the center of all the problems. He arrested Wilson, took him into jail, and I think William, aka Wilson, was really okay with that as long as nobody took him back to Merriweather. And because that's where he was scared. But he knew he was okay in Carrollton. He'd do his time and go home to Julia and little Johnny, and everything would be okay. He'd just start over. Well, it didn't really work like that. His stay would be cut short. It was only about 24 hours. And because the cows were stolen in Merriweather County, that gave Sheriff Collier jurisdiction over the crime. Therefore, Police Chief Threadgill's hands were just tied, and he had to turn him over to Collier. And this is where Turner started to panic. So, as the panic set in, a fellow inmate, a man by the name of Archie Hodgins, actually heard Turner begging Threadgill not to let Wallace and Collier take him back to Merriweather. And he would later be quoted during the trial as saying, Turner said, "They will gang up on me, they will kill me," end quote. So, but as I said before, Threadgill's hands were legally tied, and he had to turn him over to Collier. And I think as far as Threadgill knew, I don't think he knew about the corruption that was going on in Merriweather. So Turner went back to Merriweather and was taken to the Greenville jail. William Turner was brought to this exact jail cell on either the 18th or 19th of April in 1948. And we have to remember now that he had been gone for several days. And his wife, Julia, being 23, she was only 23 years old. And she had little Johnny, and she was pregnant with a second child. And she was really worried. And she reported William missing to the Carrollton authorities on April 20th. And there's no way she could have known that at that very moment or very close after, the proverbial poo would be hitting the fan. This is Sheriff Hardy Collier, who was very much in Wallace's back pocket, and they had a plan. And that plan was to let Turner go at noon. Exactly noon. So on April 20th, 1948, it was sunny and pretty much a perfect Georgia Tuesday, when the caretaker lady came and told Turner that he was to be released at exactly noon. And this had to seem weird to him and odd.
odd, but why question it, right? So Turner was released at exactly 12 noon and went to his truck and realized that his gas tank that he had left full was totally empty. And so he decided he would fill it up at this exact gas station. I'm sure it looked a little different in 1948, but it's actually still there and looks pretty much the same. So I think other than gas tanks being different, it's probably just the same, which is cool. But as he got in his truck, well, while he was standing there with the gas, he trying to get gas, he thought he saw Wallace standing with his cousin Tom Strickland, his friend Henry Mobley, and his other friend Herring Savell, just standing there looking at him. And I think it was at this point he realized he'd been set up. You see, the plan was to let him get a little bit out of town where he would run out of gas, since, they'd siphoned it out and all. At which point they would, chase after the escaped convict and catch him and shoot him in self-defense and return to town heroes. And as a perk, Wallace would be free of Turner. Nifty little plan, right? Okay, let's pretend this Buick is a 1948 Ford truck as we retrace William's steps in his last moments on Earth. This setup and ensuing chase seem like something that could only be made up for a movie, pure fiction. Yet it really happened in this ordinary southern rural area. I've driven this stretch of road many, many times, and never once since I've learned what happened on that sunny spring day have I not thought of William Turner driving for his life on that same stretch of highway. Turner must have really done some good work souping that truck up for outrunning the revenuers, because Wallace and his friends knew the plan and how fast that truck could go. Yet Turner got a decent lead on them, and I guess someone didn't do a very good job siphoning out the gas. He got a ways farther down the road than they anticipated. They probably didn't even notice when they crossed the county line. Turner kept his pedal to the metal for the full 25-minute drive down Highway 27. Then the truck started to cough and sputter. But he was in luck. Steve Smith's Sunset Tourist Camp was just ahead on the right. He had found both refuge and gas. Surely no one would murder a man in the middle of a bunch of witnesses. Don't call me Shirley. Turner jumped from his truck and ran for the door of the cafe where Steve Smith was working. He called for help just as Wallace and Savell grabbed him. He fought back and struggled against the two men. Steve Smith walked out calling, "Cut that out! Go easy on him! Stop!" And at that moment, John Wallace struck Turner on the head with the butt of a shotgun so hard that it went off. And Turner instantly stopped struggling, and Wallace dumped him in the back of the seat of Savell's car. Savell jumped into the driver's seat and sped off, headed back to Meriwether County, as Steve Smith and several patrons watched. They later said they could still see Wallace beating on Turner in the back seat as they drove away. Someone asked Steve, "What do we do?" Steve said, "I'm gonna call Lamar." I hope you guys will tune in Friday evening for part 2 of Murder in Coweta County and find out what happened to William, aka Wilson Turner. And probably a lot of you know what happened. There was a book made about it in the late 70s and a movie in 1983. But really this story is all about the journey more than the destination. And, going to the places and really getting in, seeing where this happened and understanding the whole story. So I hope you guys will come back and see me Friday night. Bye.
family named this. Okay. This episode of Murder Most Southern, we are telling the story. Okay. On this week's episode, Threadgill. Shoot. Wait. And a man named Archie Hudgens